Maya Angelou said, "I am the dream and hope of a slave." My heritage is colored by Africa-Europe relations. My father a dishwasher. My grandfather a cook. My great-grandfather a sergeant in the Burma campaign of World War II. My continent is wealthy. We have determined the rise and fall of kingdoms, states, and businesses for centuries. I speak for a group of GDL members who translated the dream of a lab of Africa into a reality. While the demographic dividend coincides with the demographic transition, it is the result of a boost in economic productivity. Harnessing the demographic dividend is an economic development challenge. Historically, economic productivity was heavily reliant on labor. When a country entered a phase where the total working age population was higher than the non-working population, growth happened. Now, the fourth industrial revolution has made economic productivity reliant on capital. This shift means that focus moves from gross domestic product per hour worked to the flow of productive services that can be drawn from the cumulative stock of past investments. In the context of Africa-Europe relations, the story is one of extraction from Africa for the benefit of Europe. The Industrial Revolution in Europe and the need for cheap labor to work in sugar plantations led to slave trade. Patrick Manning estimates 12 million slaves between the 16th and 19th centuries were moved from Africa to build European empires. Contestation for power and resources among European powers led to the bifurcation and division of the African continent at the Berlin Conference of 1884-1885. Colonizing nations proceeded to exploit the physical, human, and economic resources of their colonies for their benefit. The pattern of unbalanced trade continues today. African states pursue economic growth via a commodity-based trading system, a cash crop agriculture system, and within a trade network designed to link the total economic output of a region to the demands of a Western world. In the late 1940s, there was a growing interest to try and remedy economic underdevelopment. A group of scholars with mixed ideological backgrounds came up with complex prescriptions for how poor countries could grow rich. Building on this argument, the theory of development cooperation emerged at the end of a colonial period. Development cooperation was primarily intended to build governance capacity of newly independent states. Its secondary goal was to enable African countries to catch up with Europe. Shifts in global relations, the emergence of the Cold War, the rise of America, the recent emergence of new powers on the global scene have defined development cooperation over time. The conversation has shifted from governance capacity to humanitarianism, to meeting the needs of the poor, and more recently, to boosting trade volumes. In an increasingly competitive landscape, Germany, like other European states, has increased its aid to Africa with the hope of boosting trade volumes. Additional investments have been made to stem migration and address terrorism. These investments take place in a context where there's a rise in China's market share in Africa, which currently fuels tensions between Europe and African countries, where military cooperation between European and African states is increasingly being questioned for leaving African citizens vulnerable to European security, economic, and political interests, and where dialogue on soft power is increasingly focused on the restitution, or not, of African art and cultural objects to their original homes on the continent. Questionable narratives inform the population conversation. Environmental degradation being experienced in Africa is the result of climate change. The World Economic Forum listed the countries with the largest carbon footprints, and not a single African state featured in their list. The Political Stability Index has 5 countries from Africa at the bottom, among the bottom 5. All of these have a conflict. The 2018 Global Gender Gap has Rwanda and Namibia among the top 10 best countries for women. I close by questioning the narrative of weak women in Africa. I am the 4th generation of powerful women in my family. The dishwasher's wife is an entrepreneur. The cook's wife is a tea producer. The sergeant's wife took her sons to school against his will. My family is not unique. An African proverb says, "Until the story of the hunt is told by the lion, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter." Thank you for listening to me.